In other news, Andretti is looking at coming into F1 by 2024.
Yeah.
And supposedly, according to the article I was reading, they have money to actually scare the top three in Formula 1, top four.
That's
like,
what it.
Yeah,
Ooh.
like pre-regulations, they have that much money.
Because I heard they were confident in paying the, what is it, 200 million you
It's
need
200
to get
million
in,
just to get into
just to
F1.
get into F1, yeah.
Without the money you're gonna have to pay in research and development of the car.
That's insane.
Which is insane because you've got like 140 million for the whole season. But this doesn't it includes research and development, includes all the like crashing costs, it includes everything basically.
But you've got to start from scratch as well, so you need a place to
So you
work,
don't
you need
have
to
anything.
hire some CEOs, you need to hire some drivers, you need to hire like...
But I'm not sure if say like infrastructure will necessarily be within the 100.
Oh no, I mean it's probably not part of the budget cap, but you still need to...
Yeah,
need to
but
find
that's the
somehow.
thing. They have the money to kind of build the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But they're looking at starting 2024. So they're looking at joining not next season, the season after. It'd be interesting because if you add one more team to the grid, I don't think it's as much of an issue.
True, I feel like adding
Because
one
they
is
can
nice.
just buy out has to be fair. But as in, it's
True.
interesting because in the sense that who's going to be supplying the engine? Because it gives whoever supplies that engine an extra kind of test bed. I think what people don't realize is for say like if Mercedes supplies like 4 teams and Ferrari supplies 2 teams, Mercedes is collecting way more data from that engine than Ferrari is. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah,
So if I
yeah.
collect a lot more data, I can make my engine more reliable essentially because I have way more data being collected.
And then more people will want to buy it.
Essentially, I think that's one thing that kind of, well, obviously with, was it Porsche or VW, they were looking at getting into Formula 1, but they're most likely kind of, I think Audi was looking at buying McLaren,
Yeah.
and VW was looking at, yes, VW, they were looking at being an engine manufacturer, I think, and they would be involved with Red Bull, most likely. Yeah, probably.
It's potential there. I see it. I mean, obviously you're right, because like right now, if you add up all the laps that people did in testing, like Mercedes plus all of the engine suppliers,
They got a lot of data.
engine customers, they'd have loads of data. But Alpine, who don't supply anyone, have just got their 2 cars.
Apparently their engine is actually worse than last year, so they tried to improve the engine. It went very wrong. So their engine is actually was so bad that they're using last year's engine.
No, do you know what's mad? Everyone's saying like this is like completely. Oh, you know, we'll keep it going. So like people were saying like Alpine were waiting for like this regulation change to like fully go ahead. Like they've been saying wait until 2022, we're gonna be so good. And like initially these rules were meant to change in 2020. So they've basically done a Haas for the past like 4 years. Not completely, but like that was meant to be their big moment. They were trying to do a Mercedes.
And then their engine just...
Personally, I feel like they were gonna bottle it. Like
I feel like they might be where Haas is right now, where they're just last team. I wouldn't be surprised.
I'd put them like 7th, to be honest. Like I wouldn't be
It's
surprised.
interesting to see what kind of transpires because they all look like they have solid cars. It looks like it's gonna...
The range is really nice though. Like I love seeing the difference in the cars.
Yeah,
like,
they don't
all
look
so different.
They all look like, I think they all look different to kind of our eyes essentially. Whereas like the past few years, the difference was so small, and so you had to be kind of an expert essentially to spot the difference.
The difference would have been in the barge boards and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
but no.
and then like the rake as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess like in other news, I guess.
True. I guess one thing to comment on quickly though is they all look very different and they all may do different things. And sure, a Ferrari bathtub side pod might be better than an Aston Martin bulge, but it all depends on how that interacts with the rest of the car. So realistically, like purely based on looks, you can't guess which one would be the best.
I think like what people don't realize is people are comparing kind of section of the car, kind of this is what you're saying, but they're not realizing how that interacts with the front wing, how it interacts with the rear wing, how it interacts. Especially if you look at past this, as soon as you pass the side pod, and you go back, the difference in kind of they all have this Coke bottle kind of look essentially, but the difference is kind of the gradient of how quickly it's gonna go essentially. So like the Mercedes or the McLaren go like fairly small, whereas the Aston Martin is quite big.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, it differs how they're gonna use the airflow essentially. The Red Bull have like underside of the side pod is kind of extremely in.
Yeah, there's
compared
quite
to
a few
other cars.
teams with a similar thing, but not as aggressive.
Mm. But the interesting thing is the Mercedes actually, when you compare the Mercedes to last year's car, it looks very similar from the side.
Yeah.
It looks even from the front, like if you discard kind of like this year's changes in terms of side pods,
Yeah.
when you look, it looks very similar. Like the car looks very similar. It's kind of weird how similar the car looks.
Yeah, they
I feel
haven't
like
gone
they
with
haven't
anything
done
drastic.
anything. Yeah.
Because that's what I heard about Alpine actually. Like they'd fully gone for it, like completely sent it. They said, I think I saw a quote somewhere that said like they were trying to. It was something like they prioritized something over reliability. Like they were just trying to provide performance over reliability. So they didn't really care if it was like reliable because they could work on that afterwards. They just wanted to make sure it was as good as possible.
And then they're gonna have a horrible car.
Yeah, it sounds like they're just gonna do like a, I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if Alonso had another like 2018
Horrible year.
or something, you know. And just
Sad.
we'll see.
Testing.
Yeah, I guess we'll just talk about testing really. So, the first test that isn't a test, shakedown, happened. I mean, we can't exactly talk about lap times and stuff because nothing really matters.
A lot
I
of
guess.
teams can be sandbagging as well.
Yeah, true. And actually, I guess the main thing is like some of these teams will come up with like big developments to bring, not even to this week, but maybe even just to the Bahrain test.
Yeah, this the interesting thing is basically the cars we've seen run this week are not the cars that are going to be at the first race.
Yeah.
Because the teams have basically, they're all collecting data and they're all like, we're going to bring major upgrades to the first race. So whatever you see now, it's not going to be the same car that you see there. In terms of kind of, it's interesting, like Mercedes were the only ones to run the C3 compounds. They all ran the C5 compounds. So that can be kind of interesting. Alpine lost out on testing out the wet weather tires.
Oh yeah, they
Because
had a hydraulic
yeah.
failure or something.
So that could be like, obviously it won't hurt them at the beginning of the season because it's Bahrain and Saudi and stuff. But as you go into kind of wet weather conditions, that might hurt them because they don't have as much kind of data essentially. What else? But it's interesting, like I'd say the teams that kind of stand out, McLaren looks definitely very strong. Ferrari as well.
Yeah.
I think those are the teams that actually stand out.
Mercedes did a lot of laps. Red Bull,
But even in terms
did a
of
lot
like
as well.
speed, like McLaren didn't face the issue that basically all the other teams were facing, which is the carbon.
porpoising.
Yeah, that one. Whereas all the other teams essentially had to cut parts of their floor. They had to essentially make holes at the end of their side pods. They had to do a lot of stuff to essentially kind of get around it.
Yeah.
Whereas McLaren didn't really suffer as much from
Do you want to
that.
explain what that is quickly as well?
So essentially, when the air is accelerated below the floor, it gets so quick that essentially it stalls. And essentially what that happens is it leads to the car essentially just going up and down and bouncing on the track. And it's basically generating so much downforce that this ends up happening. And if you look at it, it just seems uncomfortable. Like
Yeah,
imagine
I
you
think
going
it's
at like
simply-
300 kilometers an hour. Like it does not seem comfortable at all.
Yeah, I think I heard in an interview somewhere or something, like it said like it was affecting their visibility at some point. Like it was, the
Yeah.
bouncing was that bad. Because obviously it's like an actual racetrack, they're going over bumps and all of this. But when it's bouncing that aggressively, like they would actually
It's
struggle
dangerous
to
as
like
well.
see.
You have to talk about how
True,
dangerous
very
it is,
true.
especially in like say wet weather and stuff. But it is interesting. I think like one thing I'll comment about this year's cars is they look fairly similar to last year's. Like I know how we all spoke about it's going to be different. They're going to look very different. They look fairly similar to last year's cars.
Yeah, apart from, yeah, I guess so.
So especially side from the front on, they look different. But when it's on track and you're watching it on track, they look the same.
Yeah, the only thing really missing is the barge board. And once you
Mhm.
get rid of, I mean, that area was mainly black anyway. so you didn't really notice it that much. So I guess yeah, it's not hugely different, but we'll see. I mean, I feel like this wasn't really a final product. This is meant to be like a transition, even though they advertise it like this is the era of close racing and everyone's going to be right behind each other. But I feel like in a few years they're going to change it again, and I don't know. They can't even make the cars even simpler.
See, it's interesting because all the drivers are saying that getting close, so following within like a second, like I think up to a second, following is a lot easier this year. Within a second, it's actually quite difficult. But it is fairly easy. It's a lot easier to stick behind a car essentially, and stay within a second behind a car without having like a huge performance advantage. So like Mercedes were the only cars that realistically last year could stay behind someone within a second.
Yeah.
No one else could do that because their car is so much like better. But this year it seems like it's way easier to stay within like a 1 second gap. Because realistically speaking, if you're within 1 second, you don't actually need to overtake them. The moment you can just undercut.
DRS or something. Oh, that too. Yeah. Oh, I swear, if all of the overtakes are just pit stop based.
But they're saying that it might affect cars with the overtaking. Like it might affect the overtaking essentially, but not the sticking to the front car. Do you get what I mean? The passing, it might be the issue might be with the passing, where the car might be affected rather than sticking to the car in front of
So
you.
we'll get DRS strings.
Yeah, DRS is going to be a big thing, yeah. They're not going to get rid of it. I don't see them getting rid of DRS soon.
Yeah,
Like, I thought they were going to get rid of it, but the way the cars are designed, yeah, I don't see that happening.